Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm delighted to see you all here today. Today, we'll be exploring a fascinating topic, the insistence of the letter in the unconscious. This session is based on the work of Jacques Lacan, focusing on the idea that the unconscious is structured like a language. I'll guide you through some key concepts and insights that shed light on how language shapes our unconscious mind. So, let's get started and dive into the intriguing world of Lacan's theories. Let's delve into how this approach reinterprets Freud through the lens of linguistic theory. Essentially, it suggests that the unconscious mind isn't just a chaotic or hidden realm, but rather it's structured much like a language. This means that the way our unconscious operates can be understood through the rules and patterns we find in language. A key idea here is that meaning isn't simply given or static. It's produced through chains of signifiers. Think of signifiers as the words or symbols we use. These link together to create layers of meaning, much like sentences or stories. Another important point is that language actually precedes and shapes our sense of self. Before we are fully formed individuals, we are already immersed in linguistic structures that influence how we see ourselves and the world around us. When we connect all these ideas, it really highlights how central language is, not just as a tool for communication, but as a fundamental framework for understanding the unconscious and shaping our subjectivity. This perspective invites us to see language as the foundation of our psychological experience and identity. Let's start by considering what we mean by the letter. Essentially, it's the material support of language, whether written or spoken. It's the tangible form that language takes, so think of words on a page or sounds we produce when speaking. Importantly, the letter is literal and physical. It's not about symbols or mystical meanings. It's concrete, something you can see or hear directly. The key idea here is that the letter carries meaning through its structure, not through some spiritual or hidden essence. It's about the arrangement of words, syntax, and form that convey understanding. And this is crucial because it emphasizes that language's power lies in its material form, what we can analyze and interpret directly, rather than some mystical spirit behind it. Finally, there's a powerful quote to keep in mind. The letter can produce all the effects of truth in man without involving the spirit at all. This highlights that the letter itself, in its structured form, can have a profound impact, persuasion, clarity, even truth, without necessarily appealing to some higher spiritual or emotional realm. It's about the raw power of language's material support, which ties into our overall theme of understanding how communication functions on a fundamental, tangible level. Let's take a closer look at the concepts of signifier and signified, often abbreviated as S and S the signifier, or S, is essentially the sound or the written mark we use, so the actual word or symbol. The signified, or S, is the concept or idea that this sign refers to in our minds. What's really interesting here is that the relationship between the signifier and the signified is not fixed or stable. It's fluid and constantly shifting, which means the meaning can change depending on context or individual perception. This idea is crucial because it highlights that our unconscious mind is governed by this play of signifiers. It's like a constant dance where signs and meanings are in flux, shaping how we interpret the world around us. Understanding this dynamic helps us see how language and symbols influence our subconscious, which ties into the larger theme of how meaning is constructed and perceived in our culture and psyche. Let's talk about chains of signification. What this means is that meaning doesn't just come from a single sign or symbol, but rather from a series of connections. Each signifier, or the word or image we use, gains its meaning through its relationship with other signifiers. So, it's like a web of associations rather than isolated units. Now, this idea extends to our unconscious mind as well. The unconscious functions much like a network of signifiers, where different ideas and feelings are interconnected in complex ways. When we interpret things, whether it's a dream or a symbolic event, we're essentially tracing these chains of signification. For example, in dreams, meaning isn't straightforward. It's layered and interconnected, requiring us to follow the links between signs to understand what's really being communicated. This concept ties into the overall theme of how meaning is constructed. It's dynamic, relational, and deeply embedded in networks of signs and symbols. Let's take a closer look at the structure of the unconscious. Unlike the common misconception that the unconscious is a chaotic and untamed part of our mind, it actually has a structure similar to language. This is a really important point because it suggests that the unconscious operates in an organized way, much like how language is organized through rules and patterns. Now, some might think of the unconscious as driven purely by instincts or raw impulses, but this view actually rejects Freud's instinctual model. Instead, it emphasizes that there is a kind of order and form to unconscious processes. And this is where language plays a crucial role. Language doesn't just express our thoughts, it actually helps give order to what happens beneath our conscious awareness. It shapes and structures unconscious processes in a systematic way. Finally, it's important to understand that the subject, or the individual, essentially speaks through these language structures. Our sense of self, our thoughts, our identity, all of these are mediated and constructed through the language that organizes our unconscious. So, overall, this perspective highlights how deeply intertwined language and the unconscious are, and it shifts our understanding from chaos to structured complexity. Let's explore two fascinating ways our mind communicates hidden meanings: metaphor and metonymy. When we talk about metaphor, we're referring to the substitution of one signifier for another, which allows a hidden meaning to emerge beneath the surface. It's like when we say someone has a heart of stone. It's not literally about their heart, but about their emotional coldness. On the other hand, metonymy involves connection by association. Here, one signifier stands in for another because of their close relationship. For example, referring to the crown to mean the monarch. It's less about substitution and more about representing something through an associated symbol. Now, how does this relate to dreams, slips of the tongue, or symptoms? These are all ways our unconscious communicates through symbolic language. They carry meaning beyond their surface, revealing underlying thoughts, feelings, or conflicts. Understanding these mechanisms, metaphor and metonymy, helps us decode what our mind is trying to tell us, fitting into the bigger picture of how unconscious processes shape our experiences. When we look at the implications for subjectivity, the first thing to understand is that the subject is born into language, which is what we call the symbolic order. This means that from the very beginning, our sense of self is shaped by language and the structures it provides. Because language pre-exists us, it essentially defines our identity. We don't develop our sense of self in a vacuum. Rather, it's constructed through the language we are immersed in. The I that we experience as ourself is actually formed through this process of linguistic construction. And here's a key point. The unconscious, which is often thought of as a hidden part of ourselves, is actually the discourse of the other. In other words, our unconscious is deeply connected to the language and social norms that surround us, which are shaped by others, voices, and expectations. So overall, these ideas highlight how our subjectivity is not purely individual or innate, but is fundamentally shaped by language and social discourse. This connects directly to the broader theme of how identity and the unconscious are intertwined with the symbolic structures we are born into and constantly engage with. When we talk about truth and the letter, it's important to understand that truth is actually structural rather than spiritual. What does that mean? Well, it's about the way the structure of language and the letter itself can reveal deeper, often unconscious truths. These truths aren't always obvious on the surface. Instead, they come through in how the letter is placed and repeated. It's like a pattern that hints at what's beneath consciousness. So, when we read the letter, when we pay close attention to its form, we're essentially uncovering unconscious truths. This is what I mean by reading the unconscious. Focusing on the linguistic form, the way the language is constructed, the repetitions, the positions of words, and their relationships. And this approach encourages us to read the productions of the unconscious asterisk, a la the letter. In other words, we interpret these unconscious messages through the lens of the letter's form and structure. It's a fascinating way to connect language with deeper layers of meaning, aligning with the overall theme of understanding hidden truths through structural analysis. When we talk about reading the unconscious, we're really viewing psychoanalysis as a kind of reading process. Instead of searching for hidden symbols or secret messages, we follow the paths of signifiers, those signs and words that carry meaning. The key idea here is that meaning isn't something that exists beyond language. It's something we discover through language itself. So, rather than looking for a hidden message, we explore how language reveals our unconscious thoughts and feelings. This approach aligns with the overall theme that understanding the unconscious involves engaging with the language we use and how it shapes our inner world. All right, let's wrap things up by looking at how Lacan transforms Freud's model into a linguistic one. What this means is that Lacan emphasizes the materiality of language itself, how language is not just a tool, but a fundamental part of our unconscious structure. Instead of viewing the unconscious as a hidden reservoir of repressed desires, Lacan suggests that understanding it actually involves reading and interpreting language. This is a crucial shift because it frames the unconscious as a language that speaks through patterns, slips, and symbols. When we talk about the unconscious speaking, it's like saying that it communicates through a structured system, like a language that we can listen to and analyze. And our role in psychoanalysis, then, is to listen carefully to this speech, to uncover the underlying structure that reveals what's truly going on beneath the surface. So, in essence, Lacan invites us to see language as the key to unlocking the unconscious, reinforcing the idea that analysis is about deciphering the meaning embedded in how we speak and how we structure our thoughts. This perspective really ties into the overall theme of the presentation, that understanding the mind involves a deep engagement with language itself.